There's a few issues, and there always are, in particular in the beef industry and live export. How do you see the future evolving in terms of addressing the needs of the public perception and working toward processing our own beef and exporting as opposed to live export? Where do you see that playing out?
Well, I guess the most substantive step we've seen to addressing the public's concerns has been the introduction by the Australian Government of the Export Supply Chain Assurance Scheme, a scheme that's intended to ensure that all livestock are able to be traced outside of Australia and puts the responsibility of the welfare of those animals onto the exporter and the supply chain handling those animals. So the responsibility of the exporter and that supply chain is actually to meet the international standards around animal welfare. That's been an incredible move forward. It's been a move that's required our receiving countries, the countries that receive Australian livestock, and the commercial players in there to make significant investments and advancements in how they handle livestock. It's been well received by our export fraternity, who have worked hard to make sure that their supply chains are in place, and it provides a level of assurance for the public that Australian livestock overseas should be being handled in compliance with international standards. One of the real advantages of the Australian industry is the fact that it offers a full range of products for a diverse range of overseas customers. You know, Australian beef and Australian cattle are exported to over 110 markets every week. And what we have is everything from the live animals that go into markets that require local processing, all the way through to high-value, chilled, vac-packed beef ready for high-priced consumers around the world. Now, that full diverse range is what gives the diversity of markets that Australia needs and Australian producers need to make sure that we get the best returns possible.
Obviously, with MSA and the pressure on quality, obviously there's a challenge there for Bos Indicus.
You know, the great thing about MSA is that it's an eating quality scheme, eating quality grading scheme that has worked from the consumer backwards. So it's actually worked off what hundreds of thousands of consumers have told us in taste tests of products out of Australian supply chains. And so what that has done is it removed any of the preconceptions and actually only relies on what the consumer tells us. What the consumer tells us around breed, what the consumer tells us around how the animal's finished, and what the consumer tells us about how the animal is processed and presented to them. And what we do know is all breeds are able to be MSA graded, and what we now know is that there is just as good a chance of high-performing Bos Indicus cattle being able to grade MSA as there are other breeds.
Net feed intake, that's another EBV that's going to be addressed in a very serious way. And that's going to be the future, not only for feedlotters, but also for grass-fed animals, I would imagine.
Look, we think it's an exciting world of possibilities with the genetics and genomic advances being made in the Australian cattle industry at the moment. One of the most exciting ones, and certainly one of the ones of particular interest to the lot-fed sector, is the work we're doing around net feed intake and feed conversion efficiency. You know, some of the early work that we've got going at the moment would indicate up to a 3 kilogram in feed per day difference between high-performing and low-performing animals based purely off genetics in terms of their achieving the same outcome in weight gain. Now, that's a significant amount of feed, and times out across a feed yard, it's a significant cost impost that can be removed from the feedlot sector if we're able to identify the genes that drive that increase in efficiency, and they're able to select animals based on that attribute.
The sheep industry seems to be ahead in that regard in terms of some of the precision feed, management that they've been able to introduce.
Certainly the prime lamb industry in Australia has been very focused on its genetic progress for decades now, which is why we're able to produce and export as much lamb out of Australia these days, out of a significantly reduced flock, than what we were doing back in the heydays of the 160, 170 million head of sheep in the country. You know, the genetics focus of the prime lamb industry has been singularly focused on meeting customers' expectations, and we're seeing that in the beef breeding and the activities of the beef breeds, who are now turning their attention to ensuring that their breeds are producing the genetic material and the genetic lines to meet customer expectations.